We, the people, love liberty in America, and I'm trusting in we, the people, to do the right thing and demand constitutional limited government at all levels. God bless you, and God bless America, and I yield back.
The chair lays before the House an enrolled bill.
Act to clarify appeal time limits in civil actions to which United States officers or employees are parties.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the gentlewoman from New York, Mrs. Maloney, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designated minority leader.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, last year when I was chair of the Joint Economic Committee, we held a hearing on the pivotal role of government investment in basic research. We found that basic research spurs exactly the kind of innovations that business leaders, academics, and policymakers have all identified as critical for our nation's economic growth. But we also found that the private sector tends to underfund basic research because it is undertaken with no specific commercial applications in mind. Businesses, understandably, concentrate their research and development spending on the development of products and processes that may have direct commercial value. A report produced by the Joint Economic Committee showed that the federal government funds almost 60% of basic research in the U.S. and highlighted one study that estimated that actual R&D expenditures in the United States may be less than half of what the optimal level would be. We are now engaged in an important national debate about how much and where to cut federal spending. And I wish to make the case for how reckless and short-sighted it would be to cut into the budget lines that fund the kind of vital basic research that led to discovery, innovation, and economic growth. Because doing so would be, as that bit of old folk wisdom goes, like cutting off our nose to spite our face. Take the budget for the National Institute of Health, for example. The NIH strongly supports the kind of basic scientific research that may not be directly useful in creating practical products yet. But it's precisely this kind of research that can lead to the future development of new and undreamed of biotech and pharmaceutical advances. It is work that can lead to the kind of advances that will allow the establishment of new products, grow new businesses, and produce private sector jobs. Studies have shown that the money we spend supporting such scientific research is one of the best investments our country can make. For instance, out in Los Angeles, UCLA generates almost $15 in economic activity for every taxpayer dollar that it invested, resulting in a $9.3 billion with a B impact on the Los Angeles region. In Houston, Texas, the estimated economic impact of Baylor is more than $358 million, generating more than 3,300 jobs. In my own district in New York, Dr. Sammy Jaffrey, a pharmacologist and faculty member at Weill Cornell Medical College, has just recently developed a promising new technology for studying RNA in cells and has just started a biotech company, all with NIH support. Time and time again, basic research has been a game changer and an economic incubator. Take the biotechnology company Genentech as an example. It was founded on discoveries that were made within our universities, and those discoveries were made with financial support of grants from the National Institute of Health. And those federal funds proved to be a very good investment. Genentech has created over 11,000 jobs, and the company created products that have had major effects on the health and economic well-being of our nation. Genentech developed drugs that treat certain leukemia and arthritis and breast cancer. NIH-funded research has also had a major impact on the lives of those suffering from multiple sclerosis. MS is a painful, painful disease that often strikes young women with children. Thanks to NIH research, drugs have been developed that are now in the marketplace that mean MS patients now live longer and have higher quality lives. Since 1970, over 150 new FDA-approved drugs and vaccines are new indications for existing drugs have been discovered in university laboratories, most funded by NIH. And millions of Americans are hoping that somewhere just over the horizon there will be new discoveries and new breakthroughs leading to more effective treatments for cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, AIDS, autism, bacteria, ADHA, schizophrenia, and depression, and much more. But treating these and other diseases will depend on discoveries yet to be made, discoveries of basic science, discoveries that can only be made with the federal funding and the work of agencies like the NIH. I suspect that to some this must just sound like pie in the sky. But just think back into our not-too-distant past. Think back to the polios of the 1950s, to the children who were crippled, and to the patients in iron lungs. Think back 30 years ago, when almost all the children who were diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma were not expected to live more than 5 years. Think back to the time when AIDS was the equivalent of a death sentence. Polio is now eradicated. The 5-year survival rate for NHL is over 84%, and AIDS is treatable, survivable. This is all because of basic research, much of which was funded by the NIH. Because of the basic research we have funded and made possible, because of our past investments in our nation's future. The Founding Fathers had the wisdom and the foresight to write into the Constitution a role for the federal government in promoting the progress of science and useful arts. If we are to remain competitive in the global economy, if we hope to remain a leader in biotechnology, if we hope to continue to advance the world's understanding and treatment of diseases such as cancer and Alzheimer's disease, we must continue to invest in the basic research and in the dedicated young scientists who make it all possible. I yield back. Thank you.
The gentlelady yields back.
Thank you, my friend. Shall I give it to you? Thank you.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5th, 2011, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gomer, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And even though this body is composed of a lot of people that have a lot of different political steadfast beliefs, it's still an honor and pleasure to serve with friends like Carolyn Maloney. So it is an honor to serve, and even though we disagree sometimes on the way we get to the end, I know that for example, Ms. Maloney's heart is always in the right place. It's a pleasure to serve.
Will the gentleman yield?
Certainly.
I would like to thank you for that very kind statement, and I look forward to finding common ground on things we can agree on and work to help the economy and growth of this great nation. And I hope you can help and support the funding of NIH and basic research, which has been so helpful to your great state and to your great universities and scientists. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. And I certainly appreciate my friend from New York. And there are some areas of research that if the federal government doesn't do it, it's not going to get done, and I'm sure there are areas we can certainly agree on. I wish I were coming to the floor just full of excitement because we had a vote today on the balanced budget amendment. I came to Congress nearly 7 years ago believing we needed a balanced budget amendment, knowing that Thomas Jefferson regretted not having one, that Ronald Reagan wished there had been one. But since I have been in this body, it has become abundantly clear that this body is more likely to have the will to raise taxes than it is to cut spending. I came here not believing that that was the case, but after we added over 80 fantastic freshmen coming up here with the right motivation, wanting to get our fiscal house in order, knowing that we went from it was 2006 when we were last in the majority before this year, where we spent 160 billion or so over what we took in. And then because we didn't have our fiscal house in order as a Republican majority, it's my belief that's the reason, the biggest reason actually, that the public turned over the reins to our Democratic friends. We haven't done a good job of avoiding overspending. But also in 2006, November, when we lost the majority, I would never have believed that we would go from a time when we were spending $160 billion more than we were bringing into the Treasury in just a few short years to spending $1 trillion more than we were bringing into the Treasury. That was just unfathomable. And it has appeared very clear that after a year ago, when the majority, we were in the minority at the time, made a pledge, we were going to return to pre-bailout, pre-stimulus spending, and in the first year, we pledged we'd cut $100 billion. And here we are. We have just, at the end of September, finished the fiscal year of 2011, and we really didn't make any cuts. Jury's out. Initially we were told we may save $27 billion over the year before. It's just chicken feed. When you're bringing in $2.2 or $3 trillion, and you're spending about a $1.3 trillion more than that, 3.6, 3.7 trillion, and all we could find to cut was $27 billion. And then we've had more recent word that we may not even save that much. Some have told me that actually we may have spent just a hair more than we did. So it became abundantly clear to me, and I know that my friend Chairman Paul Ryan voted against the balanced budget amendment because he knew it ought to have more restraint on spending in there, a spending cap. And Mr. Amash, haven't talked to him about his reasons for voting no, and Mr. Dreyer, who doesn't believe we should have one at all. It's really not fun not voting with the people that you serve with, that you're in the same party with, you share so much in the way of common experiences. Because I am a strong advocate for a balanced budget amendment. But the bill on the floor today did not have a spending cap. And this past year, we had just witnessed the largest wave election since the 1930s, and all of the over 80 new freshmen came forward with one central charge: stop the wasteful government spending. Following a pledge to make massive cuts in spending, it really appears that Congress finds it easier to talk about, quote, new revenue, unquote, which is just code for more taxes, than to cut spending. It doesn't live up to the pledge that we made. We made a pledge to the American people to restrain government and to get our fiscal house in order, and we should be doing it. 11 months into this majority, we should have made more progress than we have. President Obama has ramped up spending with the help of former Speaker Pelosi, Leader Reid, both majorities in the houses when they were Democrats, by over an additional $1 trillion. It's far more than the Democratic Congress increased the debt under President Bush in 2007 and 2008. It just is mind-boggling that we could not find enough members to return even to the liberal Democratic spending of 2007 or 2008. It's clear that if we had passed a balanced budget amendment without at least having a spending cap, then future Congresses would use the requirement of a balanced budget to increase taxes in order to balance the budget. We are already at a point where almost 50% of the American public are not paying income tax. We are on the threshold of arriving at that point beyond which no representative societies have ever been able to come back to greatness. When one more than half who's voting is receiving more from the government than they're putting in, you're done. You're doomed. It's over. All that's left is the slow walking and the low talking, but you're virtually at the end, and we are getting close. On Wednesday, the national debt exceeded $15 trillion, which left the United States with one of the highest public debt to GDP ratios in the world. This $15 trillion mark further enhanced the uncertainty that is thwarting our economy from moving ahead. It's apparent America is on a route headed for ruin, and if we continue to spend more money that we don't have, we will arrive at that destination. Washington, this government needs to stop the runaway train of spending. This president's policies have added $4.4 trillion to the national debt, all in a fraction of the time that that debt accumulated under President George W. Bush. If we had at least had a spending cap as part of the balanced budget amendment, I wasn't even demanding the two-thirds supermajority in order to raise taxes, just a spending cap. Make it a relevant spending cap. In what we voted out of committee in the regular order, which we promised we would do, we wouldn't bring bills to the floor unless they went through the regular order. That regular order produced a balanced budget amendment that had a two-thirds requirement before in the way of a vote before taxes could be raised, and it had a 18% spending cap. 18% of the GDP was the most we could spend. That was produced through the regular order, but that's not what we voted on here today. I deeply regret having to vote no, but I've seen what we're capable of and what we're not, and we need it in the Constitution that the budget must be balanced and a spending cap must be there. Some have said, well, states don't really have a spending cap. They can't print their own money. They can't go out and borrow money the way we do at the federal government. It's different, and it needed to be addressed differently. We were told, well, we had to vote for this as Republicans because it's the only one that had a chance to pass. And then on further inquiry, we were told the people that were saying that didn't believe it was going to pass the Senate, knew it wouldn't pass the Senate, and didn't think it had much chance of passing the House, then why weren't we pushing what came out of regular order, what I think most of the Republicans believe was the best bill? I don't know. But I also know, going back through this country's history, that even during some of the most difficult and darkest days of this country's history, there was a day set aside, sometimes many days set aside, for Thanksgiving. Mr. Speaker, how much time?
The gentleman has 19 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to share a proclamation of Thanksgiving from the year 1798, signed by President George Washington. 1798 is toward the end of President Washington's time as president, and it was a difficult time. We were not a strong nation. We were struggling. Some thought we ought to run to the aid of France. But their convictions in France did not appear to be based on sound doctrine and desire for liberty. There was too much envy and jealousy involved in that revolution. And we were not a strong nation. And despite all the difficulties in the United States in those early days, George Washington proclaimed the following: whereas it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful for His benefits, and humbly implore His protection and favor, and whereas both houses of Congress have by their joint committee requested me to recommend to the people of the United States a day of public thanksgiving and prayer, to be observed by acknowledging with grateful hearts the many signal favors of Almighty God, especially in a form of government by their safety and happiness. Now, therefore, I do recommend and assign Thursday to be devoted by the people of these states to the service of that great and glorious being who is the beneficent author of all that was, that is, or that will be, that we may then all unite in rendering Him our sincere and humble thanks, and also that we may then unite in most humbly offering our prayers and supplications to the great Lord and ruler of nations, and beseech Him to pardon our national and other transgressions, to render our national government a blessing to the people, to protect and to guide all sovereigns and nations, and to bless them with good government, peace, and concord, to promote the knowledge and practice of true knowledge and virtue, and the increase of science among them and us, and generally to grant unto all mankind such a degree of prosperity as He alone knows to be best. Signed by George Washington on 1798. But in the darkest throes of this country, 1863, during a war that saw the death of more Americans than any war in our history, more than the Revolution, more than World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, any of the wars, the Spanish-American War, it was a dark day. But there was this proclamation from President Abraham Lincoln, simply entitled A Proclamation. Lincoln said this: the year that is drawing toward its close has been filled with the blessings of fruitful fields and healthful skies. To these bounties which are so constantly enjoyed that we are prone to forget the source from which they come. Others have been added which are of so extraordinary a nature that they cannot fail to penetrate and soften even the heart which is habitually insensible to the ever-watchful providence of Almighty God. In the midst of a civil war of unequaled magnitude and severity, which has sometimes seemed to foreign states to invite and to provoke their aggression, peace has been preserved with all nations, order has been maintained, the laws have been respected and obeyed, and harmony has prevailed everywhere except in the theater of military conflict. While that theater has been greatly contracted by the advancing armies and navies of the Union, needful diversions of wealth and of strength from the fields of peaceful industry to the national defense have not arrested the plow, the shuttle, or the ship. The axe has enlarged the borders of our settlements, and the mines, as well as of iron and coal as of the precious metals, have yielded even more abundantly than heretofore. Population has steadily increased, notwithstanding the waste that has been made in the camp, the siege, and the battlefield. And the country, rejoicing in the consciousness of augmented strength and vigor, is permitted to expect continuance of years with large increase of freedom. No human counsel hath devised, nor hath any mortal hand worked out these great things. They are the gracious gifts of the Most High God, who, while dealing with us in anger for our sins, hath nonetheless remembered mercy. It has seemed to me fit and proper that they should be solemnly, reverently, and gratefully acknowledged as with one heart and one voice by the whole American people. I do therefore invite my fellow citizens in every part of the United States, and also those who are at sea and those who are sojourning in foreign lands, to set apart and observe the last Thursday of November next as a day of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent Father who dwelleth in the heavens. And I recommend to them that while offering up the ascriptions justly due him for such singular deliverances and blessings, they do also with humble penitence for our national perverseness and disobedience commend to his tender care all those who have become widows, orphans, mourners, or sufferers in the lamentable civil strife in which we are unavoidably engaged, and fervently implore the interposition of the Almighty hand to heal the wounds of the nation and to restore it as soon as may be consistent with the divine purposes to the full enjoyment of peace, harmony, tranquility, and union. In testimony whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the United States to be affixed, done at the city of Washington this 3rd day of October, in the year of our Lord, 1863, and of the independence of the United States, the 88th. Signed, President Abraham Lincoln. We all know, or hopefully most know, that John Hancock presided over the Continental Congress, from which we got the Declaration of Independence. In 1791, he was governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and signed this proclamation from John Hancock: in consideration of the many undeserved blessings conferred upon us by God, the Father of all mercies, it becomes us, not only in our private and usual devotion, to express our obligations to him as well as our dependence upon him, but also specially to set apart a day to be employed for this great and important purpose. I have therefore thought fit to appoint, and by the advice and consent of the council do hereby accordingly appoint Thursday, the 17th of November next, to be observed as a day of public thanksgiving and praise throughout this Commonwealth. Hereby calling upon ministers and people of every denomination to assemble on the said day, and in the name of the great mediator, devoutly and sincerely offer to Almighty God the gratitude of our hearts for all his goodness toward us, more especially in that He has been pleased to continue to us so great a measure of health, to cause the earth plentifully to yield her increase, so that we are supplied with the necessaries and the comforts of life, to prosper our merchandise and fishery, and above all, not only to continue to us the enjoyment of our civil rights and liberties, but the great and most important blessing, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And together with our cordial acknowledgments, I do earnestly recommend that we may join the penitent confession of our sins and implore the further continuance of the divine protection and blessings of heaven upon this people, especially that He would be graciously pleased to direct and prosper the administration of the federal government and of this and the other states in the Union, prosper the administration of the federal government and states of the Union, and to afford Him further smiles on our agriculture and fisheries, commerce and manufactures, to prosper our university and all seminaries of learning, to bless the virtuously struggling for the rights of men, so that universal happiness may be allies of the United States, and to afford His almighty aid to all people who are established in the world, that all may bow to the scepter of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the whole earth be filled with His glory. And I do also earnestly recommend to the good people of this Commonwealth, Massachusetts, to abstain from all servile labor and recreation inconsistent with the solemnity of the said day, given at the Council Chamber in Boston the 5th day of October, in the year of our Lord, 1791, and in the 16th year of the independence of the United States of America. This was from James Madison, the 4th President, 1815. Many credit James Madison as being the most productive person in the writing of our United States Constitution, the greatest building block for any nation in the history of man. This is James Madison's proclamation, and I quote, "No people ought to feel greater obligations to celebrate the goodness of the great disposer of events and of the destiny of nations than the people of the United States. His kind providence originally conducted them to one of the best portions of the dwelling place allotted for the great family of the human race. He protected and cherished them under all the difficulties and trials to which they were exposed in their early days. Under His fostering care, their habits, their sentiments, and their pursuits prepared them for a transition in due time to a state of independence and self-government." Signed, James Madison, 4th President, March 4th, 1850, Thanksgiving Day Proclamation. And then in conclusion, "Know ye that the Lord He is God. It is He that has made us, and not we ourselves. We are His people and the sheep of His pasture. Enter into His gates with thanksgiving, and into His court with praise. Be thankful unto Him, and bless His name, for the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and His truth endureth to all generations." Mr. Speaker, it is the wish here that you and all those of this body and around this country have a wonderful day of Thanksgiving in the week ahead. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5th, 2011, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Woodall, for 30 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the time this afternoon. It's my first time down here as a freshman during special order time. My first time trying to coordinate charts and talk the talk and walk the walk all at the same time. But I'm excited about it because I'm down here to talk about the fair tax. And if folks don't know what the fair tax is, it's H.R. 25. You can find it at www.thomas.gov, that site that everybody should have bookmarked if you care about what goes on here on the House floor. Because if you don't know, everything that goes on here is available in real time at www.thomas.gov. It's done through the Library of Congress. It's not a Republican thing or Democrat thing. It's just the real deal, what's actually happening down here. And if you go and you look up H.R. 25, it's the fair tax. What the fair tax is a bill that repeals all income-based federal taxes and replaces them with consumption-based taxes. Now, my friend from Texas, Mr. Gohmert, was just down here on the House floor, Mr. Speaker. He was talking about our founding fathers and those things that were happening between 1776 and 1787. And in that time, we funded all of federal government with consumption taxes. It was not income taxes. It was consumption taxes under the theory that if you had enough resources to go out and buy that silver tea set from England, then you had enough resources to help to fund the Republic. And if you spent all your time working on your farm and you just barely had enough money to buy thread at the local 5 and dime, then we weren't going to tax you as heavily. I want you to look, Mr. Speaker, I know you have a tough time seeing from where you sit. In 1913, shortly after the fair tax, well, right before the income tax began, we had 400 pages of tax code in America. Just the last century, in the 1900s, 400 pages of tax code and regulation. By World War II, that 400 pages had grown to 8,000 pages. 20 times as much tax code by the end of World War II. By the time we were in Korea, 14,000 pages of code and regulation. By the 1970s, 19,000 pages of code and regulation. And the 1980s, 26,300 pages of tax code and regulation. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm a reader. I love to sit down and educate myself through the written word, but I've got to tell you, 26,000 pages of tax code and regulation is going to make a criminal out of all of us, because you can't possibly understand all of the ramifications of the tax consequences of your decision. Do you remember 1986? That was the last time we fundamentally overhauled the tax code. 1986. In fact, if you go to www.thomas.gov, like I suggested, and look at the laws and regulations, you'll see the tax code of 1986. It was the tax code of 1954, updated the tax code in 1986. That was the last time we flattened rates and broadened the bases. Flattened the rates and broadened the base. And where'd we end up? Between 1984, when we had 26,000 pages of tax code and regulation, we went through this process of simplifying the income tax. And 10 years later, in 1995, we have 40,000 pages of tax code. By simplifying the income tax, we grew it from 26,000 pages to 40,000 pages. Now, Mr. Speaker, if you're like me, you go out and you shop around, are you going to use the H&R Block tax software? Are you going to use the Microsoft tax software? What kind of tax software are you going to use because you hate paying accountants to do your taxes for? You know, I used to just sit down with a pen and paper and do it myself. I used to just go through with my calculator and do it myself, but it's gotten too complicated. Why? Because since I've reached the age of majority in 1988, here we have 1995 when I'm coming out of college. Between 1995 and 2004, we added another 20,000 pages to the tax code, from 40,000 pages to 60,000 pages. 2007 to 67,000 pages. 2008 kept it just a little over 67,000 pages. 2009 jumped another 3,000 pages. 70,000 pages of tax legislation. And to be clear, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about tax legislation, we're talking about the ways that the government separates you and me and all of the American people from our paycheck. Right? Now, that's all there is in the tax code. All the tax code is how do we separate the American people from their productivity. Take 70,000 pages in 2009 to sort that out, 71,000 pages in 2010, and now 72,000 pages of tax code in 2011. Folks, what the fair tax does, H.R. 25, it asks the question that if we could start from scratch, and by scratch I mean from the 72,000 pages that we do today to just a blank sheet of paper. If you could start from scratch and draft the tax code that America ought to have instead of the one that has been forced upon us, what would you do? What would you do? Well, there's a lot of difference of opinion on what to do, but simplification seems to be one of those things that we can all agree on. You know, I didn't come to this house to try to be a good Republican. I came to this house to try to be a good American. And there's lots of opportunities to do that. And I'd like to think those things happen to occur simultaneously more often than not. But look at what folks are saying about the United States tax code. I'll quote House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. Any tax reform and closing of loopholes, which is really important for us to do as a sense of fairness, must also reduce the deficit, right? Because if you close the loopholes, if you close all the lobbyist-funded loopholes, close all the special exemptions, exceptions, carve out, by definition, it brings in more money. Mr. Speaker, did you get the free golf cart in the 2009 tax bill? Does anybody want to admit to having gotten the free golf cart? 2009, in the name of a good energy bill, in the name of green energy, we in the wisdom here in the U.S. House and across the way in the United States Congress, of course I wasn't here at that time, but in our wisdom we created a tax credit, $6,500 tax credit, if you would go out and buy an electric vehicle. Well, Americans are smart, and I love that about America. We are ingenious folks. And what folks figured out is that the $6,500 that folks were giving them if they'd go out and buy an electric vehicle, if you would put brake lights, seat belts, and side view mirrors on your golf cart, you get yourself a free golf cart. Well, it turns out, because we produce golf carts in the great state of Georgia, turns out you couldn't actually get an American golf cart for $6,500. But our friends in China were willing to import a golf cart to America for $6,500, Mr. Speaker. So, in the fall of 2009, into the spring of 2010, the IRS had to release guidance. Hear this, Mr. Speaker. The IRS had to release guidance that said, when we first crafted the free golf cart regulations, we said you actually had to have delivery of the cart by December 31st. But so many Americans are trying to avail themselves of the free golf cart provision that we're going to change the rules here in late December and say really all you need is a VIN number from the manufacturer, and that'll give them several more months to fill all the orders. Really, Mr. Speaker? Is that what we need in a tax code that distributes free golf carts to folks who likely didn't even want a golf cart, but it was free, and so they availed themselves of it? Nancy Pelosi agrees with me that we need to get rid of those loopholes. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, our tax system is broken and needs to be fixed. Let's take the poll, Mr. Speaker. Let's go for the most liberal Democrat in the House to the most conservative Republican in the House. Who doesn't agree with Majority Leader Harry Reid? Our tax system is broken and needs to be fixed. And we have the ability to start with a blank sheet of paper and make it the way we want to make it. Listen to our president, Mr. Speaker. This is President Barack Obama. You've got too many companies ending up making decisions based on what their tax director says instead of what their engineer designs or their factories produce. And that puts our entire economy at a disadvantage. That's true. Talk to any small business owner. Find anybody who's at a CFO or CEO level in a business close to you and ask that question. Are you making business decisions or are you making tax decisions? And every single time they make a tax decision instead of a business decision, America loses. Their shareholders may win in the short term. Profits may gain in the short term. But when we in America decide we're going to do something to comply with these ridiculous 75,000 pages of tax code, instead of doing what's best for business, instead of what's best for customers, instead of what makes sense, America loses. And in these challenging economic times, we cannot lose that productivity. Let me go back to President Barack Obama. And he says this: we need to make America the best place on earth to do business. The tax code is a barrier government can remove, a burdensome corporate tax code with one of the highest rates in the world. Hear that. We talk so much about Republicans and Democrats. Hear common sense coming from the President of the United States. We need to make America the best place on earth to do business. A barrier government can remove is a burdensome corporate tax code with one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world. Folks, that's agreement. I will tell you, if I had to characterize him, Mr. Speaker, I'd tell you the President sits a little further to the left than I do. If I had to characterize my own voting record, I'd say I sit a little further to the right than most folks here in this House. But this is common ground that we can all agree on. Let me just show you what that tax rate is. I hope the colors are showing up, Mr. Speaker, for folks back in their offices watching on TV, because the red line here is the U.S. corporate tax rate. The blue line is the OECD average, excluding the U.S. Now, the OECD is that group of developed nations around the world, those folks that we would say have free economies and growing economies. This chart goes back to 1981, goes back to the beginning of the Reagan era. You see America's corporate tax rate higher than the average tax rate in the rest of the world. This is the tax reform that I talked about in 1986, where you see the tax rate dramatically drop. And for a short period of time, Mr. Speaker, we became, on the red line, more productive, more competitive with the rest of the world as the rest of the world was on the blue line. And look at those years. Do you remember those years? 1988, 1989, 1990. Do you remember those productive years? I think that's when the yuppie label came around and folks were buying all their fancy automobiles and the big houses. I was just coming of age in that time, but I remember the conspicuous consumption. Why? Because America was creating wealth. And then what happened? Here's the tax increase of the Clinton years. Bumps right up there. And you see a flat line of American corporate taxation at about 39%. That flat red line of corporate taxation. Fair enough. I prefer predictability. I think we ought to know the direction things are going. I think we ought to be able to plan to make business decisions. Here's a very predictable line of corporate taxation. But what's the rest of the world doing? While America has a very predictable 39% tax rate, what's the rest of the world doing? Getting lower and lower and lower and lower. Lower and lower and lower and lower. Folks, you know who can't leave America? The American worker. Folks in my district, they can't leave. Capital can leave. A click of a mouse, you can take $1 billion, move it overseas. If you have a business in America, you can pack up your bags and go. I talk to CEOs every day who do exactly that. They say, Rob, it's just not worth doing business in America. Why? Because we're not competitive. You want to talk about growing jobs? Mr. Speaker, let's talk about keeping the jobs that we've already got. I see in the chamber my friend from Iowa, Mr. Steve King, who has struggled with these issues firsthand and who I know understands as a small businessman before he came to this House what it means to be out there trying to make payroll, trying to stay competitive. And if the gentleman would indulge me, what do you think it would mean for jobs in America if we got this U.S. corporate tax rate line below that world average, if we once again made it competitive to build jobs in America?
If the gentleman would yield,
I'd be happy to yield.
I'd pose a question back. What would you think about taking it to zero?
Taking it to zero?
Yes.
Why not take it to zero? Well, I'll tell you what I might hear back home. I say to my friend, and that's that, what do you want to do? Do you want to give business a free pass? Because my understanding is there are only two places we can get taxes. We can either take them from me or we can take them from McDonald's. And wouldn't I rather tax McDonald's than tax me?
Of course, we know, if the gentleman will yield,
Be happy to yield,
that the folks that are buying the food at McDonald's are going to pay the tax if we try to get it from McDonald's. And so we know that corporations don't pay taxes. They are aggregators of taxes that are paid by individuals, by consumers on the last stop. And so they're efficient aggregators of those taxes. They are actually the tax collectors on behalf of the federal government. The corporations that collect taxes don't pay them. They transfer it through, and by the way, they charge us for the $152 billion a year that it costs to comply with the federal tax code. And so I find it an act of frustration to seek to try to collect taxes from corporations when what I'm really doing is adding to the administrative costs for corporations, so they add the taxes and the administrative costs onto the cost of the goods that have to be competitive in this marketplace, and that makes it that individuals pay taxes, but it also means that jobs go overseas because corporations that are taxed in America are at a disadvantage to the corporations that are overseas who aren't very good aggregators of America's tax dollars, and so they have to raise the taxes here more. That's kind of the vision that I see that I would lay out here for the gentleman from Georgia, and it's we've got a long ways to go before America embraces the concept that I think will solve this problem, but I'd yield back to the gentleman from Georgia.
But you asked the all-important question, I say to my friend, why not take the rate to zero? Why are we arguing about whether it ought to be 25 or 23? I just quoted the President of the United States. He said, let's make America the most competitive place in the world to do business. Well, if we lower it to 10, maybe somebody else is going to lower it to 9. If we lower it to 8, maybe somebody else lowers it to 7. What if we take it to 0? And I voiced my concern that, well, if you take it to 0, that means I, as the American consumer, have to pay all the taxes because corporations won't be paying taxes anymore. And what my friend who has years and years, decades and decades of experience in the private sector says is there's no secret drawer where American businesses get the money to pay taxes. I go out, I buy a Coca-Cola. Where does Coca-Cola get the money to pay taxes? They charge it to me in the price of the product. My friend is saying that the only taxpayer in America today is the American consumer. There is no other taxpayer. Businesses don't pay taxes. People pay taxes. Whether it's the CEO of that business who has a high salary and he pays taxes on his salary, whether it's the consumer of that business who pays in higher price, whether it's the shareholder of that business who pays through lower dividends and lower rates of return, why not take the corporate tax rate to 0 to make sure we're the most competitive economy in the world? I yield to my friend.
Just to explore that just a little bit further, and that would be looking at the corporate tax structure. There's corporate income tax, and then there are all of the wages that are paid out in payroll taxes to the employees. And of course, one of the most regressive taxes we have is the payroll tax. And so one might argue that, well, those taxes are paid by the corporation, that half of the payroll, that .0765 that I've multiplied so many times with the employees that I've had over the decades. And of course that .0765, which is half of the 15.3% in payroll tax, half comes out of the employer, half comes out of the employee. However, the half that comes out of the employer would be wages for the employee because it is a cost of doing business, it's a cost of competitiveness. And so when we add into the price of the goods and services provided by corporations, and I don't mean just corporations, they can be they can be LLCs, they can be partnerships, sole proprietorships, you name it, a business entity that hires employees and or provides goods and services for a retail market or supplies to those who do. All of that structure of their taxes is built into the price, and a fair amount of research brings us to a number that is generally considered to be about 22% of the retail price of goods and services sold in the United States as the tax component paid by the suppliers. They get it into the marketplace, and in the end paid by the consumer. So those corporations that move overseas have a different tax structure, but those products that come in from overseas have a 28% marketing advantage over the products produced here in the United States because they don't have the burden of U.S. corporate taxes, and that includes the payroll taxes that are part of that taxing structure. So I'd say that if we can remove the taxes from productivity in America, we end up with a 28% marketing advantage for U.S.-made products over those made in foreign countries. To the gentleman from Georgia.
The
And by the way, if I could say one more thing, is I would not have picked up a nice Georgia company like Coca-Cola to use them as an example. But then that's just me. Yield back.
You know, as Coca-Cola spread out all over the world, right? They happen to have their corporate headquarters in Atlanta, but for how long? But for how long? We talk so much about trying to grow jobs in America. What about just trying to keep the jobs that we've got? What about just trying to make it a joy to do business in America instead of making it a hassle to do business in America? You may not believe this, Mr. Speaker, but this is a $10 haircut I just got over the weekend. You probably think I paid a lot more than that for this haircut. But as you think about what the gentleman from Iowa said about where cost is hidden, where taxes are hidden, I paid $10 for this haircut. But Derek, my barber, he had to pay 15.3% in self-employment taxes. So $1.50 of that $10 went straight to the federal government in self-employment taxes. Now, he's a good barber, so I suspect he's in higher than the 15% tax bracket. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, he's in the 15% income tax bracket. So he, out of my $10 haircut, he had to take $1.50 right off the bat, send it to the government in self-employment taxes. Then he had to take another $1.50 right off the bat and send it to the federal government in income taxes. So for the $10 haircut he charged me, he's only taken home $7 to feed his wife and kids. So is it a $10 haircut or is it a $7 haircut? What we tell Americans is, oh, we're going to lower your tax burden. But what we've done is to hide that tax burden in the cost of everything we buy. Because if Derek didn't have to pay those $3, he'd be charging me $7 for a haircut, and he'd still take $7 home to feed his kids. And to have an honest discussion about what kind of spending we ought to do in this place, I think we have to bring all of those hidden taxes out of price. Not only does it make us more competitive, as you suggested, but it makes it possible for us as Americans to have an honest discussion about, is government doing too little or is government doing too much? And I think, as you suggested, the studies suggest, it's about 22% of the cost of everything that we buy on average that is hidden taxes that we think we're getting away with, but that we're actually paying at the checkout counter.
Gentlemen, I'd slip another anecdote into this. It comes from just last weekend. I was over in eastern Iowa doing an event, and I happened to get reacquainted with a young gentleman by the name of Michael Dix. Now, he is 13 years old, soon he'll be 14. But when he was 8 years old, I've told this story into the congressional record in the past, he saved up his money to go buy a little box of Skittles. And so he had his change counted out just right in his pocket, 89 cents for a box of Skittles, and had to reach up to the counter, I presume, and got his Skittles off the shelf and put them up on the counter, and he counted out his 89 cents, and the checker rang it up and said, "That'll be 96 cents. And he said, "But the price is 89 cents. And the checker said, "But you have to pay the tax." That's the sales tax in Iowa. "So that's 96 cents, young man." And he turned to his dad and he said, "Dad, I have to pay taxes on Skittles? What a painful experience for an 8-year-old young man." But think of what that means if our taxes are transparent. That young man is going to grow up to be a conservative. He's going to put fewer demands on government. He's going to demand one thing, less taxes, less services. We're going to want to have more personal and individual responsibility, and we're going to let people provide for their own security in a lot of ways and achieve on their own. That is a cultural transformation that comes if you have a transparent tax and if you take the tax and stop punishing productivity and put it on consumption. Gentlemen?
Well, I would say to my friend, you talk about cultural transformation. I would tell you that transformation is actually taking us back to that entrepreneurial, self-reliant experience that America began as a nation. This business of hiding taxes and trying to make people think they're getting something for nothing, that's a relatively new experience in American culture, and it has transformed this country. I'm big on saying you got to have skin in the game. To make good decisions, you have to have skin in the game. Right now, 50% of the American population isn't paying any income taxes. They don't think they have skin in the game. Now, they do because they're paying tax and all these hidden consumption opportunities that you and I are talking about, but they vote as if they're getting something for free. And as a nation, if we're going to make responsible decisions, particularly as it comes to borrowing from our children and our grandchildren, we have to let Americans know What are they really paying for the size and scope of government? And that's not to say they can't say, I understand how much I'm paying and I'm willing to pay even more, or I hate how much I'm paying and I'm going to pay less, but it will absolutely bring us away from a culture that believes there's a free lunch and back to a culture that understands that decisions have consequences and that there is no taxpayer in America except for we, the American consumers.
You know, if the gentleman yield, history is replete with founding fathers, literary giants of the time, philosophers of the time, who continually they looked at the Greek democracy and they were appalled at what it had produced. They produced, say, for us, a republic instead. But many of them spoke eloquently about what happens when the public would realize that a majority of them could vote themselves benefits from the public treasury. Some of them said democracy ceases to exist. Some of them said that will destroy our republic. But I would guess that most of the people that were providing the wisdom at the time commented on their fear that this country would move towards a majority voting themselves benefits from the public treasury. And so that is one of the reasons that we have a republic instead of a democracy, is because those of us who are elected as representatives of the citizens of the republic are to have a higher responsibility than to listen to, let's say, people who want the fruits of someone else's labor and don't want to labor themselves. And so we're at this situation now where in the early part of this country there was a policy that you had to be a land-owning male in order of age and other qualifications in order to vote, because they wanted the public policy to be established by people that had skin in the game. And today we saw a constitutional amendment requiring a balanced budget fail here on the floor of the House of Representatives. I'd like to have seen a stronger one, but it failed here on the floor of the House. And that was the constitutional amendment with a cap at 18% of GDP and a supermajority to raise taxes, put some of that philosophy back in where it requires a supermajority to raise taxes. There's a restraint there that brings back some of that philosophy. It helps offset the disadvantage that the working American has today who's paying those taxes. Your barber is at a disadvantage because some of the hair that he cuts is of people that aren't working. Some of the, I'd say at least one out of every 3 heads of hair that your barber cuts is somebody that is in that role of 100 million Americans of working age who are not in the workforce. Many of them are voting. They're voting themselves benefits from the public trough. And I'd suggest that we take the tax off of productivity in America, stop punishing production, put it over on consumption. And I'm just looking around for a bill number that I could attach myself to because I'm drawing a blank, and I'd yield back to the gentleman from Georgia.
I thank my friend.